Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Hello, Robbie here. Did you know you can support the podcast on Patreon? Join the supporting cast today and gain access to exclusive perks, such as discount codes, our monthly Patreon film votes, and the chance to get exclusive merchandise before anyone else. Search Fighting on Film on Patreon or find the link on our website. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to another instalment of Fighting on Film, and we are continuing our Mercenary film month, Merc Month 2.
Merc Harder.
Thank you. With Uncommon Valor 1983. If you've seen any of the post-Vietnam War movies where troops that were held in prisoner of war camps are rescued, this is kind of like the progenitor of that. It's one of the very first films to tackle the issue. Really interesting concept, but also it's still a very by the book mercenary film. It goes in the classic recruit, training, complicating factor, mission, and then conclusion. It's very of the form of the mercenary movies.
Yeah, I've got it in. It's like a Wild Geese, Dirty Dozen type formulaic men on a mission film as well, with Vietnam War elements and Merc elements. There's a lot going on here, but it does boil down to, as you say, quite a by the numbers type movie. But it's not, that doesn't make it any less enjoyable. We should sort of start by saying that.
And of course, any excuse to do a Gene Hackman film.
Oh, without a doubt, the man's an absolute living legend. So maybe mentioning Gene Hackman there, we should just jump into the cast. So it's my turn this week, and Gene Hackman as Colonel Rhodes, the lead of this movie. He's a two-time Oscar winner for his role as Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, and then in 1992 he earns another one for the Western Unforgiven. In terms of his war movie roles, I'm sure we've mentioned them before on the show, but 1967's First to Fight was his first war movie role, and then obviously he plays General Sosabowski in A Bridge Too Far. He's in March or Die in that same year. 1983's Under Fire. 1988 he's in Bat 21, Geronimo in 1993, and one of his last war movie roles was Behind Enemy Lines in 2001, alongside Owen Wilson, which is such a weird casting. Wow. And he's still with us at the ripe old age of 93. And he was in the news.
He's looking pretty good.
He looks great for 93. I wish he writes. I really hope he writes a memoir, because I'd love to read his thoughts of his time in the movies.
Like his career.
What a career!
That'd be a great autobiography.
Yeah, he's just one of those actors. You see him and you know you're going to get something good. He adds a weight to this movie that it doesn't really deserve, in my opinion. But Gene just brings that professionalism that he brings to every role, and this believability, which I'll talk about later. And then we have Fred Ward as Wilkes. He's the tunnel rat. He's the late actor. We only lost him last May. He's known for his roles in Southern Comfort in 1981, Escape from Alcatraz, Tremors, and much, much more. Reb Brown plays Blaster. He's the explosive expert. We covered him last week in Mercenary Fighters, but I'll give you a quick recap. He was in Strike Commando, Robo War, Flight of the Intruder, and he was the 1979 version of Captain America. Then I
liked him more in this than I did in...
Yeah, it's almost film. Like two different actors. He gets so much more to do here, and it's
actually likable in this.
Likable in this. He gets just look. They haven't boiled him down to like a Stallone or Schwarzenegger type action, muscular action star. They've actually given him.
If you told me that was the same actor, I would have been like, no.
Yeah, very true.
No, but anyway, do continue.
But it's just a lot more going on here for the characters to get there. For the actors, to get their teeth into character-wise. It's just a lot more going on.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
And then we have Randall Tex Cobb as Sailor. He's the tough guy. He was a pro boxer turned martial artist. I think we've covered him before in 1987's Dirty Dozen threequel, The Deadly Mission. If you've not done our Dirty Dozen December, please go catch up on that, because it nearly broke us.
Why not? Why haven't you done the entirety of Dirty Dozen December? like we
Matt's
did.
calling out all the new listeners, I see. And Uncommon Valor's only his second credit. And he has a lot of other TV and film roles, including Miami Vice, Raising Arizona, Ace Ventura, and Walker, Texas Ranger. Then we have Patrick Swayze as Kevin Scott, the current serving soldier brought in to train the troops of Gene Hackman's little private army. And this is only his third credit, and he goes on to win a Golden Globe for Dirty Dancing, becomes this massive, massive star. But in the 80s, he sort of cut his teeth on roles such as Red Dawn, Roadhouse, Point Break in the 90s, and he was in the American Civil War series North and South in 1985.
Yes, he was.
This is a very early role for him, and yet again, he's one of those actors that just brings just a bit of gravitas, a bit of weight to this movie, because there's a lot going on with his character as well. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2009, age 57, which is a real shame. Lost him way too soon. Then we have Harold Sylvester. Then we have Harold Sylvester as Johnson. He's one of the pilots brought in. He was in An Officer and a Gentleman, 2014's A Place for Heroes. He was in a 1983 made-for-TV movie also called Uncommon Valor, which is about a guy who is in a mental hospital and he sets fire to it. Wow. It's like a sort of Towering Inferno type firefighting film. And then he has roles in TV, major TV hits such as Murder, She Wrote, Doogie Howser MD, NYPD Blue, Malcolm in the Middle, to name but a few. Then we have Tim Thomerson as Charts. He's another pilot, and he's another prolific film and TV character actor. He's Starsky and Hutch, Private Benjamin, Hill Street Blues, Zone Troopers, Tour of Duty, Walker, Texas Ranger. Again, just to name a few of his credits there. And then in the last of the sort of really in the last of the real principal cast, we have Robert Stack as Harry McGregor, and he's the financier of the operation. One of Gene's friends that he's made in his years in the army. And he's an Oscar nominee. He started acting in the mid-1930s. During the Second World War, he served in the US Navy. But he also acted during that time. He was in a film called Eagle Squadron, among many other roles. Post-war, his credits include the lead role as Elliot Ness in the 1950s Untouchable series, Fighter Squadron in 1948. He played Edwin Sibbett in Is Paris Burning? And then he played Joe Stilwell in Steven Spielberg's 1941. And then for me, I know him best as the host of Unsolved Mysteries. And I absolutely love that show. It's such an absolute banger. Really? Yeah.
For me, like the role that stands out for me is he's the pilot that talks down the plane in Airplane, the comedy.
Oh, of course he
is.
He
has this amazing choreographed entrance where he comes into the airport terminal and gets accosted by loads of people with leaflets.
Oh,
it's like a very funny choreographed fight scene where he just lays them all out.
That's great. That is a good film. I do like that film. No, as Unsolved Mysteries, me and Katie watched a lot of it during lockdown, and it always just became a unsolved mystery.
Yeah, I forgot he did that.
It's great. 292 episodes. For a while, and he passed away in 2003. And then just to round out the cast, we have Luau Nyaga Lai as Lai Fun, one of the daughters of a man who helps them go into Laos.
She rocks a Type 56.
She does, yeah. We have Gail Strickland as Helen Rhodes, Gene's wife, Charles Aidman as Senator Hastings, Debbie Parker as Mai Ling, Jane Kazimierz as Mrs. Wilkes, and Todd Allen plays Frank Rhodes, Gene Hackman's son. And finally, Michael Dudikoff is in a very small role as Blaster's assistant, but it's almost blink and you'll miss it.
He's the dude loading the plane at the airport.
That is literally blink and you'll miss it role. Doesn't even get a line, I don't think.
It's very odd, isn't it? It's sort of like a meteoric career trajectory from there. That's very odd.
But that's the cast. As opposed to last week, I mean, to be fair, most of the films we've done in Merc Month so far, it's probably the most stacked cast that we've had on the show for a while.
Yeah, and to be fair to it, it does give its characters some, room to breathe and evolve and have an actual backstory and be real people. So it invests you in the film more than
it really does
than some of the the others that aren't as well written. But moving on from there, production is equally interesting because directed by Ted Kotcheff, who is probably best known for Fun with Dick and Jane, but then later on, First Blood, and then the absolute classic 80s black comedy, Weekend at Bernie's. So a very interesting career of doing various different little bits of comedy, little bits of straight action stuff. So we have to mention that John Milius was the producer on this. So there's a very definite Milius vibe running through the film, I think.
Very, his teeth are very much into this.
He's credited with doing some uncredited dialogue tweaks and rewrites. But the origins of the film are really interesting because apparently the story for the film was developed by Wings Hauser, who we know best from Firebase Gloria, actor, producer, writer, director. Yeah. And it just seems like a very unlikely source for such an interesting idea for a film. And essentially, according to the American Film Institute, Hauser hired a chap called Joe Gayton to take the idea and form it into a script. However, Rob found a very interesting interview with Psychotronic Video, which was a little magazine that was put out in the late 80s, 90s. And in a 1989 interview with Psychotronic, Wings Hauser says that the credit for the film was actually stolen from him, and that while he was credited as an exec producer, he actually wrote most of the film. And there's a very interesting little explanation from how he views it. He says, I actually wrote it and lost it in arbitration with John Milius and Joe Gayton, who was a shoe salesman, apparently. You've heard of These Nightmares in LA. Well, yeah, 18 months it took me to write the script. Everybody knows I wrote it. I have the contract and I got all the money, which is, that's nice for Wings.
Fair play.
But John Milius is a scumbag right-wing bastard, and I can't wait for his day to die.
Wow.
So there's no love lost, apparently, between Wings Hauser and John Milius.
Wings was so angry, he went and started Siege of Firebase Gloria to take his anger out.
So that's really interesting, and apparently it was based on an idea that he got from speaking to a Vietnam War veteran who was a friend, and as well as some murmurings around the time of POWs and people that were missing in action still being held in Laos and Vietnam and Cambodia, etc. Possibility of that, and I think that's where the origins of the film, and he evolved that into a script, which is really interesting because around the same time that the film came out, there was a parallel, almost true to life actual operation that was led by an ex-US Army Lieutenant Colonel, Bo Gritz, who, operating from Bangkok, much like in the film, did recce operations to try and find prisoners of war that were still being held. Although, unlike the film, he was much less successful and never actually found any evidence to support the fact that they were still being held. Although there were people still in being repatriated throughout the 70s. So the film was produced by Buzz Freichtens, who produced many of Milius's films and all of the Rambo films. And of course, mentioned earlier that Milius himself has a producer credit. Cinematography came from Stephen Burham, who worked as the second unit director of photography on Apocalypse Now. He did the cinematography for The Untouchables, Casualties of War, and a whole spate of gangster movies, including Hoffa in 92, Carlito's Way in 93, and Mission Impossible. So we did a lot of work with Brian De Palma.
Yes.
And I think the cinematography is really quite good in this, and
it's fine.
It stands up quite well. Yeah. It gives it a very clean, not stylized or dated too much. I don't think.
No, it's very. I just say, it's fine. To me, it's fine. I don't think it's not stand out, but it's not
nothing that really stands out, as you say. I agree there. The score was by James Horner. This is quite an early piece for him, so it's he came to the fore in the early 80s. So this is one of his earlier works. Went on to do scores for films like Commando, Aliens, Glory, Braveheart, Mask of Zorro, The Devil's Own, Deep Impact, Titanic, Enemy at the Gates, Wind Talkers,
so much,
and The Four Feathers. So he has an incredible career. I quite like the score; it works quite well, but it isn't too in your face. It's kind of just supports the scenes. I think it doesn't do anything to really lift the film. It's just a very competent, straight score that kind of settles and gives a bit of atmosphere to the various sequences. I think it works quite well. Distributed by Paramount, budget was around 11 million, and I think it made just over 30 million at the box office. So it was a success, and it did quite well.
It did.
Mostly filmed in California and Hawaii, with Hawaii standing in for Laos. And they also did a week in Bangkok doing those street scenes.
Yeah.
Which really helps. I think that would have
of course
looked a bit weird if they tried to recreate Bangkok
in Hawaii or California. Yeah.
So all of the actors were put through a 1-week boot camp for some military training, and Chuck Taylor, a Vietnam veteran and quite well-known weapons trainer, worked with I think Gunsight and some of the other early American civilian instructing camps and schools. Who was a friend of John Milius, was the technical consultant for the film, and I think he was I could be wrong, but from the research I did around this, I think he was an Army Ranger. So sounds like just the man to be the advisor on the film.
Yeah.
And just to finish off, a couple of interesting alternate names were considered for the film during production.
Yeah, they're great, aren't they?
And they're listed over on the American Film Institute. So the first one was Last River to Cross. Then there was The Eight, which I think is a reference to the team.
Yeah, 8 of them, yeah.
Of 8 people. And then Youth in Asia, which is a bit... doesn't really tell you what the film's about.
Well, isn't Youth in Asia that's a Hangover title for... No, that's a Hangover title for Full Metal Jacket.
Really? Okay.
Or it's a title that is... No, not Hangover, sorry, Full Metal Jacket's a few years after this, isn't it? Yeah, that title was proposed by... Apparently, Matthew Modine said that it was proposed to be called that for Full Metal Jacket, Youth in Asia. In his
I mean, obviously it's a pun.
Being on the movie. Yeah.
It's a pun, and probably might have been a pun that
not right for this
evolved. No, it kind of evolved from actual slang from troops in Vietnam, that kind of thing, I would imagine. And then most interestingly, we have Missing in Action, a full year before the Cannon films.
Yeah.
Missing in Action came out with Chuck Norris, which has a very similar sort of premise.
Yeah, that would have worked as well. Uncommon Valor's good though. I do like the name. Yeah. And just quickly, I have a retro review this week. Roger Ebert review. We haven't had any from him in a good while. A legendary film critic, and this comes from the 19th of December 1983, and he gives the film 2 stars. And I'll just read you the full review because it's hard to pick out a snippet because he's written it as a through line. So he says, the basic idea of Uncommon Valor is so interesting that it's all they can do to make a routine formula movie out of it. But they do. The idea, a career colonel suspects his son is being held as a prisoner in Laos and organises a team of his son's old army buddies to go and bring him out alive. The story resembles the adventures of Colonel Bo Gritz and has overtones from the scenes in The Deer Hunter where Robert De Niro returns to Vietnam to find Christopher Walken. It has a real potential for combining action with emotion. At first-rate talent is assembled for Uncommon Valor, suggests the movie was going to hope to do just that. The director, Ted Kotcheff, who made a strong male action movie such as North Dallas 40 and First Blood, and the star is Gene Hackman, who combines heart with threat as well as any actor in the movie. How then did they come up with this forced march through 2 hours of cliches? The movie rips off The Dirty Dozen and countless lesser movies, giving us 3 basic elements: assembling the team, rehearsal, the raid. Halfway through the opening scenes, we're saying the lines ahead of the actors. We know Hackman is going to find most of his son's old buddies, We know they're going to be involved in a variety of peacetime lifestyles. We're not surprised to discover that the buddies include a surfer, a sculptor, a black business executive, and a convict. The only left out is a Hell's Angel and the priest. Then come the rehearsal scenes with a mock-up of the POW camp that are necessary to set up the climactic payoff. We see the dry run, so the real thing will seem more exciting. All of this proceeds with a lead-footed predictability. There is an early attempt at intrigue when we see a mysterious CIA type spying on the training sessions, but then they're told off by the Texas millionaire who's financing the mission, and that's that. One of the most awkward elements in the movie is the way it springs unsurprising surprises on us. The old veterans are joined in training, for example, by an untrained kid. What's he doing there? Would you believe that he's the kid brother of one of the missing pals? I would. In fact, I believed it minutes before Hackman revealed it. In convincing action movies, the actors never seem to anticipate anything. Surprises happen. The results of violence are unpredictable. Uncommon Valor, however, is one of those irritating movies where the actors sometimes act in a way that makes sense only if they already know what's going to happen next. They whirl around because they know the enemy is about to appear. They put a series of explosions in the path they know the enemy will take. It's all cut and dry. By the time we arrive at the movie's unsatisfying ending, we're ready for somebody to take a break in and rescue us from the theatre.
Wow, you really did read the whole thing.
Because I tried to pick snippets out of it, but it was really hard to because usually I can just choose like two little bits, but
just
Gene
Roger's stream of consciousness there.
I thought it would be great to just
show
his contempt.
he has some points. Like obviously there is that scene with the businessman Backer, who his son's also believed to be in the camp. That's why he's investing. And he just says, "Fuck you." I'm going to do it anyway.
They said they're going to audit him, don't they? And then
they're going to audit him,
nothing happens
and stuff. Yeah, that we see. I mean, it might well have happened, but
it might have happened. The film didn't
go into that. Swayze's character, it's his father that's in a camp. Not his brother. Interesting review. I think
it is
a little bit unfair.
But then there's more from a 1988 book written about Gene Hackman and his career up to that point by Alan Hunter that I found. So he says critical reaction to Uncommon Valor was diverse. It was revealed in some quarters as a right-wing fantasy, viewed elsewhere as a crypto-western in the manner of John Ford's The Searchers, and casually dismissed as a big screen version of the A-Team by the Monthly Film Bulletin. It's certainly a film that poses more questions than it answers, but Hackman's rugged authority adds a semblance of integrity to the action man heroics. Which I think is a lot fairer.
Yeah, I also read somewhere that Hackman wanted to imbue it with a little bit more nuance. Than was initially planned as well.
I think you're right.
So I think perhaps it could have been even straighter than it is without Hackman and some of the other choices made. So yeah, that's fair.
I do. I think that's fair as well. So moving on to the one-word reviews this week, and we had an absolute bumper crop again. Obviously coming off of a film no one's seen in Mercenary Fighters to a film people do actually enjoy in Uncommon Valor. That was no surprise to us here at Off HQ. So to rattle off some of your one-word reviews, J. Neal goes with Boom. Rubber goes with Blaster. Kahar Dissecting Worlds goes with Alley. Paul goes with Grenade. Ken KD Campbell goes with Problematic. Andy McClellan goes with Great. Pete the Paint goes with Dancing. And Matt Green to end goes with Average. So there was I haven't read all of them because there was quite a lot this week.
Yeah, it was about 40.
Yeah, but
you can join in with those at Fighting on Film, by the way.
Yeah, you can do every week. I think I put them up every Sunday or Monday. So keep peeled for those. Yeah, it does seem like people really enjoy this one. I know we've had a few fans that have always said to us, when are you going to do Uncommon Valor? When are you going to do Uncommon Valor? And it's like, well, we'll do it when it fits. And it obviously it fits for this month. And I know it's one that people do find quite endearing, quite enjoy it. Yeah.
I can understand why. I actually hadn't seen it before we decided to do it.
I was amazed that Matt hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, it just never come up. So I enjoyed it. Talk more about that in final thoughts, obviously, but definitely one I enjoy watching. If it was on TV, I'd definitely sit down and watch it again.
Yeah, it's a proper like action. It feels like an ITV4 film. We always say that on the show. For American viewers, it's a sort of sports slash action type channel of an offshoot of one of our like sort of main TV networks here in ITV. It just feels like it would fit that. They play like the Bond films, they do classic war movies. It feels like it would fit on there. So maybe talking about action and kit, we should move on to the alley tally.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
So Matt, as someone who hasn't seen Uncommon Valor, what did you pick out? I'm very interested because there's so much in this.
Gene's fedora at the end.
It is cool that
it looks good. He's got an aesthetic going on at the end of this film.
Very much does.
So we talked about this beforehand, but the film has a very interesting way of getting as many guns into it as possible. That you have a training sequence where they all have quite modern weapons, Colt carbines, an M14E2 sniper rifle, which Swayze uses up on the hill. And then they are headed to Bangkok, and a CIA agent intercepts them when they're just about to pick up their weapons for the mission, which is very inconvenient. But completely fine because they go and find a suitably dubious Frenchman
in the Golden Triangle.
Who can provide them with just the kind of kit that they need. And then you get a whole extra plethora of weapons, ranging from Thompsons to more Garands.
That they buy like a proper World War II era cache of guns, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. And it kind of like crams in like two distinct sections where there's cool new stuff, cool old stuff. But yeah.
See, I saw
there's this distinct look that Gene has at the end of the film, which I
very
much
like. They all sort of have a bit of a look about them. They all go a bit more mercenary, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Which I really like. But I think it also, not to get all serious about it, but it also sort of shows how much surplus American equipment was sloshing around Southeast Asia at that time. Because there's M1928 Thompsons, Garands, SKSs, M18 recoilless rifles. I think there's even a number 5 jungle carbine in that little scene where they're having like their 18 moment.
There's a weird Mauser and stuff.
Yeah, there's all sorts going on. And then obviously you've got like the Frenchman's like bunker full of M16s and things like that. It's all it just
20mm Orkans are like leaning against the wall with some M2 Brownings and stuff. And I like how he walks Gene and the boys past the good stuff.
Yeah, and they have this really cool scene which could be pulled out of any sort of canon type film where they have like this book full of silhouettes of firearms, and he's like, this is the good stuff.
God, yeah.
This is the not so good stuff. The menu, yeah, it's a great scene. And they end up spending £4,000 on quite a lot of good guns, actually, which is probably quite a bargain even now. But I love that. I love that switch from NAM era weapons to sort of World War II Korea type weaponry. Because as I say, it sort of says without saying it how long the war in Vietnam lasted. That these weapons are still.
Indochina was a conflict zone for 30 years nearly. Yeah.
Exactly. And I also think it serves Colonel Rhodes' backstory a little bit, where he served in Korea. So him picking up the Garand is like this old soldier being reunited with his rifle in a way. I saw it as that. I was looking a bit more into it than maybe you need to, but
No, totally. I got that too. One of my favorite scenes with Gene is where he talks about being at the Chosin Reservoir.
It's really powerful, isn't it?
And so when he is handed or is seen with the M1 Garand, it makes complete sense because he's a tac driver with that. He really does look like he knows what to do with it. And of course, Gene was a Marine, wasn't he? So
I think he served. Yeah,
knows how to handle a rifle. And there's a couple of great scenes where he's shown sighting it in with is it with Bo?
I think it's with Swayze. Yeah.
Is it with Swayze? I can't remember.
I think it's with Swayze.
He's sighting it in before the mission.
Oh no, it is Bo. Yeah. It is.
So he's sighting it in at the just before they go on the actual mission, and one of the guys is acting as a spot, and he says you're like short to the right by about 2 meters, and he just tweaks the rear sight, adjusts it for like windage and distance, and just nails the target. And then that comes back into use during the actual mission.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
They have like a sniper that's firing at them from the wood line, and I think he drops the guy with 2 rounds.
That's it.
Like,
yeah.
One ranging shot, and then just drops the guy.
It's very good.
Gene doing Gene, you know.
Gene being Gene.
I think there's some really cool stuff in this.
There is. I think I've written in my notes that's possibly one of the best weapon actor combos ever. I like Swayze on the BAR/recoilless rifle. That's really cool.
Yeah.
They have their sort of Piat moment where Gene goes, "Bring up the recoilless," or something words to that effect. That's very cool.
Doesn't he say something like this is about to go kinetic? Something like that.
A very actiony type line.
I'm like, okay, Gene. Okay. Getting serious now.
It's very good.
But yeah, Swayze does look good on the BAR, and the BAR is the obvious choice for being in that
it is.
surplus set of weapons. There's some really cool stuff in there. As you mentioned, there's the M18 recoilless rifle, the 57mm recoilless rifle, which you don't really see in a lot of films.
No, you don't.
And it kind of works really well.
Not being operated off of a mount.
Yeah, it's being fired from the shoulder.
Yeah, that's very rare.
It's interesting to give that to Jiang, their scout, their guide. And he's up there with Swayze in like an
does a great job
position. Yeah, he does.
He must have used him in Vietnam or something, maybe.
Yeah. The other stuff that stood out to me was there's a weird MG42 mock-up.
Yeah, I have no idea why they did that.
I don't know what that was built around, but
M60.
It's a weird mock-up.
Built around an M60, yeah.
I couldn't make it out. There's plenty of M60s in the film too.
Yeah, there is, yeah. I don't know why they did that. Why does it need to be an MG42? Like M60 would have been fine.
I assume they didn't want the Laotian prison to have M60s, I guess. But maybe one of the towers did have an M60.
Maybe they wanted to just show them as the enemy force a bit more. I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps so. Or maybe that's just what it was already mocked up before the film, and that's what they had available from the armor. I don't know.
Yeah, very much so.
But one thing that did stand out during the training sort of section of the movie, they're flying in at night, and the 2 helicopter dudes are wearing AMPVS 5A night vision goggles.
Oh, cool.
Which I can't remember the which one of the 2 helicopter pilots like swings the helicopter in, flicks up his night vision goggles and shouts for them to get in the chopper, which was a very cool scene. I appreciate it.
Very nice. Yeah. Although I don't like in that scene though, I don't like the fact they speed up the footage to get him over to the other watchtower so we can take him out, because it looks really jarring. Like anytime a modern type film does that, it stands out every time I see it. But those helicopters are Bell Jet Rangers, and then later on in the Vietnam section, they're Bell Hueys, which is another nice harken back to Nam there. So for me, I've got, if I may, Matt, if I may jump in.
Of course.
I've got 2 things this week, alley tally wise, that really did stand out to me. So the opening sequence set in 1972, I really like that all the LERPs are wearing Erdl. That's a really nice touch. And they've got M16A1s, and they've got Texas got an M60. I like that, very Nami. And that whole opening sequence is like shot for shot recreated in Tropic Thunder. There's so many elements in that.
Yeah, it totally is.
And then there's some really cool little harken backs to Nam later on when they change their equipment, when they get those new World War II guns. So Reb Brown wears like a tiger stripe jacket, another LERP reference. Gene wears some duck hunter camo, which is like early Nam. And then Fred Ward makes his own interesting camouflage uniform by painting jungle fatigues.
He does, he does.
Yeah, and that was actually done by MACV SOGs and LERPs in Vietnam. And there's obviously a mixture of Second World War and M1956 webbing, which is another little Nam reference, I guess. But
Texas
then
wearing jeans as well on the mission.
Texas wearing jeans, yeah.
Or sailor, rather.
Sailors wearing jeans and this weird, like, indigenous sort of tracksuit top type thing. I don't exactly know what it was meant to be. But then the thing that really, really stood out for me this week Matt knows because we've been chatting about it. So in the training sequence, they're wearing Adidas trainers, and I really like that because I was like, yeah, these guys are older. They're not going to want to wear like big boots. Maybe like I sort of just thought maybe it's just easier for them. But I actually think it's a little bit of product placement because in the 80s, Adidas was sort of developing their brand in that area. I know they go on to sponsor like Run DMC in the 80s. They become like the first brand to really sort of get into cultural marketing, I guess. That's probably a bad way of putting it, but you know what I mean. They start to get their gear in film. So there's a lot of like, I think when Blaster's getting in one of the airplanes, there's an Adidas bag placed well in shot, and you can see the logo. But then I was looking at the sneakers that they were wearing, and I do like a bit of drip. Fans will know. So the Adidases that they're wearing are Adidas top 10 basketball shoes, and they're worn by most of the main cast. But Swayze, and I think Gene at one point is wearing them, and I think it's really cool that Gene Hackman was running around wearing these Adidas boots, and they are Adidas Alaska hiking sneakers, the brown Adidases that you see, and they're quite rare. I've looked them up. They go for a few £100s now.
Of course, you've looked them up.
Secondhand markets. Well, I spent like half an hour looking up these Adidases.
Of course, you're on Depop looking for them, I bet.
Yeah, I was like, I need them for my uncommon Valor airsoft impression. No, I just thought that was really interesting that they just somehow, I'd like probably, someone somewhere knows that maybe that is Adidas product placement because they are in shot a few times, especially like when they have the fight.
John Milius probably sent Adidas a fax. We're like,
maybe did, yeah.
Making a film. Gonna need some shoes. It's gonna be a cool film. Gene Hackman's in it. Patrick Swayze.
I mean, probably
maybe.
May very well be. But I think it was just really interesting that it just stood out because you don't usually get sneakers in war films. So it was a nice little thing to see.
It's a look. Yeah.
Very strong look. I like it. And it must have been very comfortable as well to run around doing those action sequences in sneakers. But no, I all the alley in this is really good. And it just goes into real Merc territory where they have to use like older weapons, indigenous weapons and stuff. I like that.
Also, like the beginning of the film where Gene's swanning around Bangkok and Saigon in like white safari jacket.
Oh yeah,
peak mid 70s leisure wear.
Very much so.
Travel wear, definitely.
Gene was comfy as during this whole film.
True. But I like, as I mentioned for my first pick, Gene's fedora starts out looking very Indiana Jones.
He does a bit,
looking very cool, and then by the actual time they get to the compound and the mission, it's a bit worse for wear. The brim's all like crooked and like crunkled, and
it looks very adventure.
Yeah, so you get that you get that feel that he's had to trek all the way to the helicopter base and trek all the way back, and it's a nice little visual cue to we're in the jungle.
I like
doing a mission. We're mechs. It's hard work.
The only thing I wish they would have done there is had him in a pork pie hat because it would have been a nice French Connection reference. But maybe that would have been too much.
ex US Marine Corps colonel wears pork pie hat in Saigon.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Probably not the vibe that he normally goes for.
No, maybe not. Maybe not. And maybe on that bombshell, we should move on to favourite scenes.
Hello, I'm Al Murray, and you're listening to Fighting on Film, the world's #1 war film podcast.
So, favourite scenes this week. I'll jump in. I enjoy all the film. I think it's really good. I think it's a bit of fun, a well-made movie. But the bit I really enjoy.
Final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. Let's go. No, but the part that I really enjoy, because it adds weight, and I said this earlier, is the part after the initial Vietnam sequence, which I find a little bit cliched and overplayed. It's a little bit melodramatic, that opening section. But it does enough to set up why. But then Gene is traveling around Southeast Asia trying to prove that his son's alive and that these pals exist. And he's paying people in Laos to find him. He wants people to take a picture of him and get him to sign it so he can cross-reference signatures. And people are coming to him and just giving him the photo back, acting like they found something, and he's paying these people. And it rings really true. It's like it's just a father trying to find his boy. There's a really sort of they're a little bit overdone, but there's a bit where he has a vision of his boy in like baseball, pee-wee baseball uniform, like reaching out saying, "Oh, can't find me, daddy," and all that. And he's like, Gene's in bed, sort of really upset and having these visions, and it really sets him up. He feels like a real person. It grounds his character, and obviously, as Roger Ebert mentioned, he's based on Colonel Beau Gritz, who went into Laos and Vietnam, and he was funded by these trips in part by Clint Eastwood and Ross Perot, who was like a businessman millionaire, who I think the Robert Stack character is probably based on. But that whole sequence of Gene going around trying to find his boy is really affecting.
And it takes a decade.
It takes years. A decade, and it brings it up to the modern day. So it's a long story. You find out that Rhodes has been retired out because of his obsession with trying to find these men. He's not a popular figure in the sort of political landscape because he's putting pressure on people. And I really like that. Only Gene Hackman could give that weight to it. I mean, I know
it's a very economical way of doing it as well.
It is, yeah.
Gene has enough agency in those scenes to convey what's going on. But it's only like 5-6 minutes.
It's a 5-6 minute sequence, but it does so much to set his character up. I almost wish that everyone else had that opportunity, because I sometimes think that the rest of the cast don't. They have a lot to do, but they don't have as much characterization given. Some of them don't. I mean, I know Fred Ward's character does. Sailor definitely does. But some of them don't. But no, I enjoy it. That's probably my. Obviously, I enjoy the action at the end, but like as far as world building and character building your movie, that's probably one of the more affecting ones we've had for quite a while on the show. I think.
Yeah. For me, there's a couple of scenes that stand out. There's the scene where Wilkes, his background is explained. He was the LERP team's tunnel rat, and talks about why he struggles with claustrophobia, because he leaves the camp and goes and sleeps outside most of the time during training, and he doesn't explain the situation. It's explained by I think again it's Beau explains it to one of the helicopter guys, who obviously wasn't with the original unit, and essentially he is inside a tunnel. The tunnel collapses, looking for a weapons cache. Hair's movement frantically kills whatever moved, and it turns out to be a woman and a child.
Yes.
And so he is heavily suffering with PTSD. And then, of course, later in the film, he has to go in a tunnel.
Yeah.
It kind of always everything, on the cards for him.
It brings it back to everything this movie sets up. It happens. That's like the clichéness of it. It's quite funny.
But of those scenes, I like the scene where Gene's character talks to Wilkes and says, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" And he kind of shares his own experience of PTSD and trauma, where he talks about being at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir and how he sees the frozen faces of his dead Marines, and they never go away. He just kind of makes friends with them. Is how he.
This is a really good bit of dialogue. Like, and
it's a great little monologue.
And again, it brings
Gene's
back
on the ball.
Yeah, exactly. It brings it back to how good this cast are that they've got together. Like Gene just brings this gravitas to everything.
Exactly. There's a great little scene where that they have lost their equipment, and Wilkes, I think, asks him. Well, Gene asks him to get a truck, and he says, "Rent or buy?" And he says, "Steal the fucker."
Yeah, it's great.
He has some great dialogue
he has
throughout
some good
the film.
lines. Yeah, he does. He really does.
But I think that monologue scene about the Chosin Reservoir is my favorite. And then, as you say, the action sequences towards the end are really well done. To to a scale that you kind of don't expect. Like some of those buildings really go up.
Oh yeah, they blow the heck out of like that little compound, don't they?
And some of the helicopter flying is really quite impressive.
Yeah.
They've done a lot of work to get those shots of the helicopters being dynamic, throwing dudes in. Like there's a guy that hangs off the run of one of the helicopters trying to get on board again, and he gets thrown into a little shack thing. But yeah, I really like the training montage too, because the way they show the steps of the operation, and it's kind of like a cheap way of having action early in the film without them having to do like a preamble mission or something.
Yeah. I actually like, in terms of action, I actually like that initial little skirmish that they have, because they're not expected to have it, so it shows how professional they've become.
The Laotian border
like
patrol.
A border guard. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, they want
really
their opium.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Gene's like, it's gonna go kinetic.
It's gonna go kinetic.
Sets up
it's great. No, it's very good.
Sets up the recoilless rifle.
That's the most war movie bit of the film we get. Like that feels like a open pitch little skirmish. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, Swayze gets his first kill. One of Jiang's daughters is killed while the other one absolutely lays it down with the AK, the Type 56. She's very good at it. She doesn't have a great many lines.
They have them in just to kill them off quite quickly. Apart from the other lady.
not a lot of lines, but she's a good enough actress to
they're hard as nails.
Make you care about the character.
Yeah. Hard as nails are those Norinkos. I love it. That's another thing. Like you mentioned Swayze there. Like I think his through line of not having seen action, and then you always feel like he's really wary of what's going on. He doesn't. He's in the moment, but he's having this sort of out of body experience. Maybe I'm putting too much on the performance there,
I know
but
exactly what you mean.
It means so much to him to be here to maybe find his dad. Yeah. Obviously, the gut punches that he doesn't. But
and neither does Gene.
Spoilers. Neither does Gene. But like
and that scene on the helicopter. Oh, the bit where Gene cries.
Oh my god! Yeah, I'm going to mention that in final thoughts.
Carry on.
Swayze just gives this whole sort of he's us. He's like the human, the viewer character, where like this is such an out of body thing to do, and he's shocked and coming to terms with it in real time. And I think I really like that they chose Swayze to do that, because he's the younger character. He's got a lot at stake anyway, and Swayze just shows like in a really early role what he would go on to become. And I love Swayze anyway. Like he's for me like one of the best 80s sort of heartthrobs to come out of that sort of Rat Pack generation. Can't wait to do Red Dawn, because that's another film where he absolutely is an amazing performance in that film as well. But yeah, just the characters of this will make it, and the actors make this movie. With completely different cast, I think this movie wouldn't be nearly as good as it is. It's one of those like perfectly cast movies. I very rarely. Sometimes I think with these movies that we do, could you change out that character? It wouldn't matter. But this is one of the movies where I think it has to be these people. They only pulls it off like this. And maybe we're going into final thoughts territory, or maybe I take us in there too soon. Is there anything you want to add before we do?
No, I think that covers it nicely.
Brilliant.
Moving into final thoughts.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, like that ending is the real gut punch. So spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it. So they get a couple of guys out. I think it's 3, isn't it? 3 or 4 chaps.
Yeah. And the rest of them are all, I assume, like Laotian.
Yeah, they just leave them there. It's a bit mean.
Yeah, like they just run away into the jungle, which is fine. They'll escape on their own.
Yeah, exactly. They're there for their own issues, I guess, or their own.
There wasn't a Rambo First Blood 2 incident where there's a lot more dudes than he can possibly get out.
Yeah.
Situation.
So I thought maybe that what they might have done. But they don't.
Is that it's such a long time since I've seen Missing in Action. Is that the plot to Missing in Action 2?
Pretty much, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But yeah, it's such a gut punch. So they rescue a chap, and he's flying back, and you think that that's Frank. You think that that's Gene's son. They don't tell you it's not really. And he goes, look, I'm really sorry. Frank got ill. And I tried to help him back to health. And he died. But if he hadn't have picked me up on that day, I'd be dead. And you learn that he's the guy that Frank was the guy that was saved in the beginning. And that's quite nice little juxtaposed little surprise for the audience there. And then him and Gene have this embrace. And it really hits quite hard.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
But then there comes in my criticism of the movie, is that I want to see more of the end. I don't just want a freeze frame on him and his wife embracing. I want to see a bit of aftermath of how these men are treated, how Gene maybe could be redeemed in the eyes of the military for doing this really big heroic deed. And I just wish they'd have shaved just a little bit off the training sequence, because I already know these guys can do it. They were alert team in Nam. Like, I already know they're capable of this because they've done it. So I don't need to see as much. I just wish they'd maybe just trim like 20 minutes off that training sequence and stick it at the end, and we could have like a little bit in America maybe afterwards.
Yeah, I suppose it was. You could say it's just a little bit too hard to do that.
Possibly. Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but I always
that's a hard topic to cover, like the return of veterans and POWs from Vietnam.
Or even if you showed how it sort of redeemed Gene's character in the sense of, you know, you could have had the senator go in, I'm really sorry, I doubted you. You were right all along. Or, you know, he could have had a letter from the family of the guy he saved, and was like, look, we're really sorry that your son died, but thank you so much. Or
isn't the guy he saved the backer's son? Because you see them at the end, don't you?
Oh, I think, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So there could have been a conversation between Gene and the backer, for sure.
Yeah,
that would have worked well.
I think that would have worked. But I just want to see more of Gene in the role. I think that's what it comes down to, really, is that I enjoy his character so much. You know, you could have had like a section of him doing the talk show circuit, doing like, oh, you know, it was like this, that, and the other, and they could have made the characters written a book about it or something. You know, they've gone a bit more celebrity with it being the 80s. I don't know. It would have been interesting. But no, I just love the film. I think it's a fun romp. There's enough going on. There's more emotional weight in this than you think. I just think it's really good. I can't say fairer than that. It's not a must watch. Like, it's very hard to find on DVD, but I think if you can seek it out, please do.
You can rent it online, that's for sure.
You can.
As I said at the beginning, it's a very classic composition of recruitment, training, complicating factor, mission. But that doesn't hamstring it. It's there's some good performances. There's some strong character development that we've already talked about. I like the parallels between like the echoes of Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah. Each
guy is an expert in his own right. Wilkes is a hand-to-hand combat expert. The Bo's character is an explosive expert. Sailor's a weapons expert. You know, they all have their own little things. Gene's the marksman, and they've got the helicopter pilots.
Yeah, they don't really.
So, you know,
the marksman,
you've got your various different elements, and it is a classic mercenary movie trope where those kind of things coming together. But it's an interesting movie. It definitely fits interestingly within not only the Vietnam War movie genre, but also the subgenre of missing in action, POWs, and also mercenary films in general, which we've been covering here on Fighting on Film through Mercenary Month 1 and 2.
Yeah, we have. So that was 1983's Uncommon Valor. We've finally done it for you big Uncommon Valor fans out there. And don't forget to join us next week when we cap off Mercenary Month 2 with the Patreon pick, which is 1998's Ronin, the first Robert De Niro film on the show.
It's a big one.
It's a huge one. It's going to be fun. Sean Bean, the guy out of Leon, that I can't remember his name. A proper ensemble again, much like this film.
It is. It is.
So yeah, do join us for next week for Ronin, and as always, leave a review, give a star, a like, whatever it is on the app you're listening on. We really appreciate it here at FOF HQ. You can find the back catalogue of the pod at fightingofilm.com, and we'll catch you again next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.